Welcome to TIABC's Voice of Tourism podcast, where we discuss issues that affect the visitor economy with subject matter experts representing private businesses, sector associations, destination management organizations, post-secondary institutions, all levels of government, and other stakeholders. I'm Walt Judas, CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of British Columbia, an advocacy organization that works on behalf of its members to influence government policy and direction. My guest today is Marsha Walden, President and CEO of Destination Canada. Welcome, Marsha. Nice to have you.
Good morning, Walt. Great to be here.
So we've known each other for probably 10 or 12 years, and I know a bit about you. I know that you're a mother and you're a grandmother. You live in the Metro Vancouver region. I know a bit about what you like to do for fun, being on the water and on the islands and so on, and of course travel. But I don't know a lot about your earlier history, where you were born and raised, where you went to school, that type of thing. So maybe you can fill me in.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm one of the few people born and raised in Vancouver. I think we're certainly a city that attracts a lot of people from a lot of different places in the world, but I happen to be lucky enough to be born here. I was actually born to Dutch immigrants. I'm the first generation Canadian that was born anywhere other than in the Netherlands. So it was a unique time in the early 50s when lots of people were emigrating from Europe. And then I came along in the late 50s. And so I went to school in Kerrisdale and went to UBC, which was very close to home. And as did most of my friends, because we all went to Point Grey High School, and not many people went off to university in those days, right? They tended to go to their local, which for us was, we were fortunate to have UBC just down the road. So that's kind of my early life, I guess. And my family, my father was in lots of different businesses, but probably the one that I was most involved in was a hotel business in Vancouver. It doesn't exist anymore, but lots of summer jobs in that hotel.
We have something in common in our history. My parents were German immigrants, and I'm a first-generation Canadian. Was also born in Vancouver. So I like to say about Vancouver, everyone is from everywhere else. That's certainly what it seems like these days.
It's true. It's true. You know, it's rare for me. I still see my high school friends a lot. They remain some of my best friends even today. And so having been born and being able to build a career in Vancouver like you gives you lots of grounding, I think.
It does indeed. Yeah. Yes. What did you take at UBC?
I have a commerce degree, and I had a major in marketing and a minor in finance. And I originally went to UBC thinking I would be a journalist, and then thought a bit about law for a while, but thought, no, I'd like to be a corporate lawyer. So I thought I'd go into law via commerce, and ended up just really liking what I was doing in commerce. So never went on to do a law degree.
Another thing we have in common, I actually was a broadcast journalist for a time, but also thought about law. I just didn't have the marks in school to be able to get into law school. I did too much other stuff that deviated from my studies. But nonetheless, you mentioned that your father, amongst the business interests that he had, was in hotels, and you did lots of part-time jobs. Tell me about your career journey and what led you into the tourism sector full-time. And to my knowledge, it started with Destination BC, but I'm sure there's a long history prior to that. And then, of course, now Destination Canada.
Yeah, well, I've been fortunate to have lots of diversity in my career. And, going way back, my very first job as a teenager was being the buffet attendant at the planetarium's dining room buffet.
Oh, my.
So my very first job in life was in tourism. And I often reflect back on that because, of course, later I had the chance to be a desk clerk and a server in a restaurant and things like that. And it's so important for youth to have the ability to work part-time and to get summer jobs and put themselves through university and get that first on-ramp into the workforce to learn what work is like and how to behave and how to interact with people. And so, for me and for many people, tourism has provided that on-ramp. And I give a lot of talks around the country and often to chambers of commerce. And I'll often ask people, how many people in this room, and it'd be a diverse array of people from every imaginable industry, had their first job in a tourism related business? And more than half the room's hand goes up every
Yeah.
single time. And yet it's so sad that we undervalue the contribution that those jobs make to the early work life, or if you're a new Canadian trying to learn a language, it's so critical to have those opportunities. Anyway, I digress.
But an important point that we may get to a bit later.
Yeah. So yes, I got out of university with a Bachelor of Commerce in marketing, and I started with one of Vancouver's best known advertising agencies, Baker-Lavic day, and that did many mergers over the next 17 years as I worked my way up through the ranks at Baker-Lavic, eventually being fully owned by BBDO, which is part of the Omnicom Group, one of the largest agency networks in the world. And I think that actually exposed me to so many different industries. You know, I had clients in the newspaper business and in packaged goods and in communications, like tire manufacturers, you name it. I had a chance to study their business, their competition, understand what they needed from a marketing perspective. It gave me a really good cross section, I think, of some of the flagships of Canadian industry. I then went on and worked for the Lottery Corporation in business operations and marketing and social responsibility, government relations, had a whole bunch of roles there. And then one day I got a call from a headhunter saying, we have this role over at Destination British Columbia. We think you'd be a good fit. Would you be interested? So I went for the interview, and I guess it went well because suddenly I was the CEO at Destination British Columbia, and really loved that role, and always felt my dad, who had long passed, would have been so happy to see me there, because when he was back in his hotel days, government of the day launched the Supernatural British Columbia brand way back in the 80s. He
Yes.
thought it was just amazing and marvelous. And so suddenly there I was leading the organization responsible for the Supernatural British Columbia brand. So that was a great honor. I was there 7 years, and then I got another phone call asking if I'd be interested in making the jump over to Destination Canada. But the timing of that was very interesting. We were just early months into the pandemic. So I kind of weathered the storm at Destination British Columbia, tried to figure out how we were going to make it through, and then suddenly had to do it for another organization. But I felt like I got my feet wet,
You did.
sorted
You
out first time around.
did indeed. So I'm thinking about all of the experiences that you've had and even working in a crown corporation for lotteries. How did that prepare you for the gig at Destination BC? And what did you learn during that time? Or perhaps what were some of your career highlights working at Destination BC?
Yeah. Well, I think when I was at lotteries, I often think the businesses you work in can be learned, but the business skills you acquire take 25, 30 years to acquire.
Hmm.
So, I learned a lot about people leadership. I learned a lot about how to develop strategy. I had a transformation agenda that I was responsible for at Lottery. So I got to work with some of the best management consultancies in the world around how to transform businesses. And so those skills all came with me over to Destination BC. Most of my career has been spent in the marketing realm. So across every imaginable product, as I mentioned. And so it was that weird combination of stuff, it seemed, that the board at the time was looking for, because Destination British Columbia had just been recreated as a new crown. I
Yes.
was its first, CEO, and it was coming from inside a government department to be recreated as a crown, as had been Tourism BC back in the day. And so the board wanted someone that had a transformation background, someone who understood how to develop culture with people. And I learned many of those skills at the Lottery Group, and brought them with me to Destination BC, and really enjoyed my time there.
So I would imagine too that that was also great training ground and experience for the role at Destination Canada, albeit now that's magnified by I don't know how many fold, but essentially you've got responsibility for an entire country,
Yeah,
which is big shoes to fill.
I suppose it is, but it's also the same principles,
Hmm.
whether you're operating, looking at, let's say, the marketing function of a small business or of an entire nation. Brand building, thinking about your sales channels, understanding your customer, all those principles come with you. And
Sure.
so it doesn't really matter how big the painting is, if you will, how big the puzzle is, you're still applying those same things. And, some of the ins and outs that are a little different, of course, are the partners that you work with. Suddenly, instead of being one of the provincial partners of Destination Canada, I was helping to lead that provincial partnership, provinces and territories across the country, and working with government in a different way. So, the provincial and federal governments share a lot of similarities, but they also have their own ways of working and their own rules and things like that. So there's always something to learn in a new role, but I like to think that the 30 plus years of business experience is something I bring to every role, and as everyone does, bring all of those elements with you.
One of the things that you needed to learn, I know, is French.
Yes.
How's that coming?
Oh, it's been a challenge. I must admit, I wished that I had been, more motivated as a teenager to become fluent in French, because
Same.
learning it in your 60s is a whole other matter. The memory isn't quite as forthcoming as you wish. And so, for 5 years now, I've been doing a couple of mornings a week with my tutor, and I think I'm passable in being able to deliver remarks in a speech in French. I can understand it quite well now in meetings. Many of my board members speak French, and so often the meetings will, go into French for a while, and you have to follow along, of course. But trying to conjure up my own conversation and, think of the words myself, I'm so darn slow that the conversation has moved on by the time I've formulated my sentence. So it's I've given it my best shot. I will say that I've lived up to the promise I made to Minister Melanie Joly when she asked me to take on this role. She said, "Please promise me you will try to learn French," and I have for 5 years taken French lessons, and I think kept my promise.
Yeah, good for you. I always find that if at the very least you can understand, you're a long way there. It's like me with German.
Mm.
I once spoke it fluently. I better understand it now than I can speak it. It takes me a while. If I'm in an environment, say in Germany, I can start to pick up the vernacular and have a conversation, but I'm much more comfortable just listening. And I think in your case too, you have to do a lot of listening in your role at Destination Canada, and it's helpful that you can understand the gist of the conversation.
Yeah, and it allows me to attend the conferences that, our partners
Sure.
in Quebec and Alliance will put on, and I can be a member of the audience and listen along like everyone else. So it's, and I've truly found the learning quite a positive experience. It's almost like a hobby for me now. So I've found the best of what it can offer me, and hopefully it'll stick after I'm out of this role.
Yeah, good for you. So I want to transition and talk about Destination Canada. I think most people tuning into the podcast know what Destination Canada is. However, if you run into somebody while on vacation or a neighbor, how would you describe the organization's mandate to a layperson?
Well, at the highest level, I usually just say, we are the stewards of the Canada brand as a destination, and that requires us to deliver on 4 different components of our mandate. So the first of that is to really think about supporting the profitability and vitality of our industry. So I spend a lot of time with my colleagues across the provinces, territories, and major cities talking about Canada's competitiveness and how, as a destination, we can be more competitive. And not just from a marketing perspective, because, as you've probably heard me say too many times, well, marketing can deliver short-term competitiveness, but it's really the product side, the destination development side that delivers long-term competitiveness, because at the end of the day, it's what people actually experience here that creates the word of mouth and support for your destination. So if you want to remain competitive, you have to think about both sides of that coin, both the marketing side and the development side. So, that's part A of our mandate is thinking about the profitability and vitality of our sector. There is a marketing function, to be sure, and that's where, in fact, we spend the most money and we have the most people. But we also have a fundamental mandate around research and information being supplied to all levels of government and private operators so that they can make good decisions about the sector. And then finally, our mandate asks us to collaborate with provinces and territories and other parts of the industry, and importantly, the private sector, in how we do our work and trying to bring people together around Canada as a destination. So it's a 4-part mandate, vitality, marketing, research, and partnership.
And all of it tied to the federal government's tourism growth strategy.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we were created through an act of parliament, and our mandate is described in the CTC Act. But from time to time, governments publish strategies for, the next 5-year view, et cetera. And the federal tourism growth strategy, which I would say was a collaborative effort between ourselves, our ministry, and our minister, and a huge amount of input from all across the sector, created that strategy, and it set some pretty ambitious targets for the sector, which I think we will achieve.
So I want to explore those 4 primary areas a little bit. You mentioned product development. Is Canada missing something? What more do we need? It seems that we have such a diverse array of products and services for people to enjoy. Yet I do know, even in British Columbia, in the last number of years, there hasn't been enough new tourism product that has been developed. There are exceptions and some really great new attractions and some in the works, but I hear that frequently from communities. We need something else to attract visitors time and again. Are you seeing a need in parts of the country, something that can be developed as new or further, I dare I say exploited, but that's not what I mean, but something that we can leverage more, I suppose, is a better way to frame it.
Well, I would say just overall that, we do have incredible assets in this country from a tourism perspective, but we don't have that much capacity in any of them. So if you think, for instance, about even the Rockies, globally famous tourism destination.
Yes.
And yet we are bursting at the seams in peak period. And so what more could we do beyond, getting our visitors to come in off-peak periods and having crowd management processes and whatnot? What opportunities exist to further explore what is available in the Rockies? Similarly, on the accommodation front, and you would know this one well, Walt.
Yes.
For the last 15 years, Vancouver, for example, has added no additional hotel rooms for 15 years while tourism exploded. And so what can we do to improve the investment climate for accommodators to want to invest in accommodation in Vancouver and elsewhere in the country where we have similar challenges? Similarly, on the access front, Canada's a huge country. Many places are only accessible by air, and yet we have limited capacity for that in our country. So what can we do to improve the transportation networks that we do? And not just air, but when you land in an airplane, how do you get from the airport to the excursions or to the hotels? There's a whole network of shuttle systems and other things, all part of destination development. It's product, but it's also accommodation, it's labor, it's transportation. Sure. It's that confluence of things that make up a tourism experience.
Now, you mentioned earlier this notion of dispersion, trying to get people to travel in off-peak periods. And I've heard that for decades.
I know.
Particularly in British Columbia, obviously where both of us reside. Is that realistic?
to be able to do that? I mean, most people love to travel in the summer months when generally they book their vacation. And other than if you are a skier and you love the winter season because of the snow, is dispersion realistic for our country, notwithstanding the other challenges that you just mentioned, among them being access?
Well, it is realistic because it's happening. We certainly still have challenges in peak periods, and we're driving rates up in accommodation because there is so much demand. But we've also seen the shoulder seasons really fill out. So our travel trade says to us around the world that June and September are now some of their strongest months. You and I being baby boomers, you probably know that one of the preferred travel periods for boomers is September, October.
Hmm.
Avoiding all the school kids and the pressure points of seasonality, but we are seeing much more strength come into May, June, September, October, and we'll just continue to build that out. And we have some really prime examples of that in British Columbia. If you think about what Whistler was originally, it was a ski
Yes.
destination, a ski resort. Then they started to build out their summer. Well, now the volume of visitors they receive in the summer is greater than in the winter. Now, the value of those visitors isn't quite as high as a skier on a per capita basis, but they've built a tremendous summer business and now they're working on their fall. And, we see a lot more activity and events and things in the fall. So it is definitely possible, but it does require real investment over time in a strategy that is intentional to do that. And sometimes that's really hard. Like we've worked on that, say, for instance, in Prince Edward Island, where many business people, they're busy as heck all summer. By the end of September, the labor force has gone back to university and businesses are tired and they just close shops. Anyone that wants to try to build out further into the fall has to get the collaboration of all of their other business owners to say, let's add another week or two to our season. And that doesn't always work initially. So you have to keep chugging away at it.
No question, a big challenge. So you mentioned the increasing volumes at certain times of the year. I should pause to ask, how did Canada fare in 2025 in terms of visitation, national tourists arriving, revenues, etc.? Do you have any sense of that at this
Yeah.
point?
Yeah. Well, I think 2025 will be another banner year, notwithstanding the challenges that we started 2025 with, where the early part of the year was pretty slow. There was a lot of uncertainty with all the trade war talk and some, just concern about whether or not border flows were going to be easy or difficult and all of that. So, while our drive traffic from the US, our primary international market, it was down a fair bit. And certainly the border towns in both the US and Canada really felt that. So not to diminish, how difficult that made their summer, but overall air was flat and international non-US, so all our overseas markets were up double digits. So from an international perspective, we had a good year. And then, of course, Canadians themselves really made choices to travel in Canada. And so travel to the US was down about 25%. And we had a record summer. It was a $59 billion summer from May through September, best year ever. Visitation was down, but value or revenue was up. And I think 2025 will come out well, and we'll probably have another record year.
Wow, that's really encouraging to hear, and a testament to how people are working together in the partnerships that you alluded to earlier at the provincial and federal level. So I want to carry on with the mandate because you talked about one of the core elements of Destination Canada is marketing.
Yes.
How has it changed in recent years since you took the helm, but are you seeing just changes in general to how you market and how others, the competition, is marketing to try to attract that high yield visitor?
Well, certainly things have become much more data focused. People and a country like Canada that positions itself as a high value vacation. We need really good data to be able to target the people that are a good match for Canada, both from an income perspective, but also from an expectation and a desire perspective. Where are those outdoor explorers that really love what we have to offer. And so the use of data has become much more important. And in the last 2 years, it's almost become like a space race in the AI space. We know the enormity of the impact that AI is going to have on travel planning behavior. The way our content systems are set up for the internet, if you will, and search is not the way bots are going to seek information. So if we used to exist in a B2C world or a B2B world, we're now going into a bot to bot world. And we have to restructure what our content looks like, where it is seen, and who's sharing it in order to be found in those environments. So it is a space race in AI. Every destination, every competitor we have is looking at what they need to do here to understand how this is going to change how we market. But I'm really pleased to say that I would say Canada is in one of the best positions amongst global players. We've invested heavily in the Canadian Tourism Data Collective. It's all AI, foundational stuff based on AI. We started there, so we're not retrofitting. And our team is winning awards throughout the industry and throughout industry generally for the work we've done in AI. So I feel we're in a good position, but we have got a lot to do to stay ahead of the competition.
Well, I know you're a big believer in data and research, and you just mentioned the Data Collective, which is taking off across the country. So many people, so many communities and organizations participating in the Data Collective. Tell me about that. Expound on it. What is it? What is the intent? What is the ultimate goal with the Data Collective that you're trying to achieve on behalf of the country?
Yeah. Well, certainly the Data Collective helps us make better business decisions just because we have a very broad cross-section of data sources that we can look at to say which markets are performing, which consumer segments are performing, which parts of the country need more development. What is the level of accommodation? What rates are they, so really having a very, very good picture of the tourism landscape. And so that helps us make business decisions about what to do with our funding. But the intent of the Data Collective was to empower everyone in our sector across the nation to have access to the same level of quality data and in real time being a critical aspect of that. Statistics Canada is one of the most admired statistical agencies in the world, and they often advise the UN and other places. But by the nature of how they collect their data, there's a time lag of, anywhere from 3 to 5 months. That's not always timely enough for individual private sector operators to make decisions about how to change what their business is doing. So we've supplemented what we get from Destination Canada with over 200 from Statistics Canada with over 200 other data sources. So things like Moneris information on transactional data, so that we can provide insight to our sector in real time. We've also created something called through Aurora AI called the Digital Twin. So if you are targeting a specific segment, you can now go in and have a natural language conversation with the data. So like I'm speaking to you, Walt, I can say, well, okay, if you were coming to Canada with your family, what kind of things would you prefer to do?
Yes.
How many days would you typically stay? What do you think you'd spend while you're here? What sort of food do you like? You can just have that kind of a conversation with the data. You don't have to be a data geek anymore
It's
to
amazing.
get the information out of the system. So that's more on the marketing side and business decision-making side. But one of the things we discovered during the pandemic was we didn't have very good supply side data. So we didn't know how many businesses are out there, what subsectors are in, are they healthy? Are they still filing taxes? We don't know how much tax they're filing, but are they filing means are they alive?
Yes.
So, we have better insight into what the supply side of our industry looks like now. And so, we have various tiers in the Data Collective of access to the data. So people that are power users, for instance, like the provinces and their whole research teams, they help support the Data Collective by paying a small subscription fee to be part of it. But for the rest of Canada, it's free. It's free access, and it's very user friendly, and it's robust aid to business. And so we have some great examples of tiny businesses like the Bay of Fundy kayaking business that started having a conversation with the customer segments and refined how they went to market and who they targeted. Their occupancy went from, I think, 46% in the previous summer to over 80% last summer's. They're great examples of companies big and small using it. So we're very pleased with that.
My guest on TIABC's Voice of Tourism podcast is Marsha Walden, President and CEO of Destination Canada. The final thing on the mandate is about providing information to private businesses, which you just talked about, but also senior levels of government. So are you able to use all of the research and data that you're collecting through the Data Collective in communicating with senior levels of government and, dare I say, trying to have senior bureaucrats and ministers and MPs and anybody connected to the various departments that support tourism understand our industry better, to be able to elevate tourism as a great opportunity to build Canada's export market, if you will?
Well, let's be candid. We still have a lot of work to do to help policymakers and the Canadian public even understand the value of tourism in our country. Most people are shocked to learn that tourism is bigger than mining, bigger than agriculture, bigger than automotive manufacturing by a large margin. It's a $130 billion industry annually. And the Data Collective is instrumental in helping us shape messaging around not only the economic value, but the social value of tourism in our midst. As an example, I'll tell you that about a month ago or so, our Prime Minister announced an ambitious new goal for non-U.S. exports. So he said we will double non-U.S. exports by $300 billion in the next decade, so by 2035. Well, I saw that announcement and I said, well, let's see how much of that tourism could contribute. And because we are, our international receipts are an export because it's foreign dollars buying services in Canada. And so I quickly told our deputy minister, we can do 10% of that. And so that is a pretty substantial contribution to a very ambitious goal, because we know that tourism exports will triple in the next 10 years. So we're $16 billion in tourism exports, non-U.S. tourism exports today. We believe that number will be $46 billion by 2035. So the Data Collective gave us very quick answers to that query from me, which is how much can we contribute to that goal? But we also have new tools like the Wealth and Wellbeing Index that give us more insight, not into just the economic value of tourism or how many people are employed, but also the environmental impacts we have and the social value that we bring to the wealth and well-being of Canadians. And so there's 6 dimensions of tourism's value that are monitored by the Wealth and Wellbeing Index. That's a whole new way of looking at the contribution our sector makes to life in Canada. And so those are metrics that we put in front of our policymakers on a regular basis, just helping them understand the impact of our sector and the growth potential. So yeah, it's useful. The Data Collective is useful on all fronts. And I've been spending a lot of time, Walt, talking about the leisure side of travel, but there's enormous levels of information also available to us on the business events side.
Yes.
Where, we know that, for instance, we were talking about seasonality. Business events are critical in helping with seasonality and bringing in big conventions in October, February, etc. It really keeps our hotels thriving.
So that's a partial answer, I suppose, to the next question that I was going to ask, because you referenced growth potential a couple of times. Is that from existing markets, excluding the U.S., or are there other markets that we can look to and perhaps build market share from?
Well, there certainly are. If we look at what the world tourism market will do, we think it'll grow about 5.2% on a compound annual growth rate between now and 2035. So 5.2% for global tourism. We think Canadian tourism will do about 4.8%. But if you think about it, that's almost double what, what we can see from the Canadian economy as a whole at the moment. So the potential for tourism growth is so much stronger than the general economy. And that is not just the markets we target. So Destination Canada focuses on 9 global markets, and those represent about 80% of our overall visitors. But if we think about the explosion of travel in China, which is still completely underexploited, if you will,
Yes.
and now with ADS returning to Canada, we think that the growth there will be enormous again. And the Middle East potential, Dubai is set to double the size of its airport. It will be by far the largest airport hub in the world. So all flights from India, flights from Europe, flights from South Pacific will all start to come via Dubai. So there are huge new markets on the horizon, and then you think about a country like India, where the middle class is growing really fast. Well, when the middle class grows, they start to travel. And
Yes.
as new aircraft come on board that make travel time to Canada more palatable, there's enormous potential there too.
We know there's a tremendous amount of competition from other destinations. In fact, dare I say, there's a city in the United States that has pretty much the same budget as Destination Canada has.
Yeah.
And an extremely popular destination for a multitude of reasons. But what will it take for Canada to be back in the top 10 as a favored global destination?
Yeah. Well, 2 years ago, we set our sights on becoming a top 7 global destination. And that requires work on all those levers of competitiveness that my colleagues in the provinces and territories have helped us identify. So we are working certainly on marketing elements like brand leadership and on yield for Canada, because we have capacity challenges. We need to make sure that every head in every bed is giving us maximum value for that space.
Yeah.
But we also know that we have a lot of work to do on development and investment. So we are really doing a lot of work to understand what global investors are looking for and how other nations help attract tourism investment into their markets. So we've talked with some of the biggest investment funds in tourism in the world, learned, what France is doing, what Italy is doing, et cetera, and just understanding how they position tourism. We know that we need to work on labor productivity, so the digitalization of our industry in order to continue to have service levels where we want them for a high-value product. We need to embrace the AI and digital capabilities more rapidly in our sector. We know that sustainability, I don't think sustainability, in my view, will be a competitive advantage. I think it will be table stakes for all industry
Great.
aspects. So we just need to make sure we are doing our best in that area so that we don't become a pariah in any way of unsustainable behavior or activity in our sector. And so we continue to work on that. These are the areas that some are long-term, like attracting investment to our country. I would have said it may have been a longer-term thing than I think it will be under the current environment, because, man, stuff is happening fast now. And so a lot of the barriers to investment are coming down quickly. Access used to take years to negotiate, new air bilaterals. Wow, last week we saw all these new air bilaterals with Middle Eastern countries effective immediately.
Yes.
And so, things are suddenly really moving. And so I think our chances of getting to a top 10, certainly, I mean, we're 11 now. So getting in the top 10 is,
We're
should be.
close. We're this close.
We're this close. Getting to top 7 may take us, all the way out to 2030 as we originally planned, because some of those challenges take time to address. But I think we have a plan for what we need to do, and it's not just work with the provinces, it's work with all the key sectors. So we're working with the Restaurants Association, the airlines, the airports, Tourism HR Canada, Indigenous tourism Association of Canada to really make sure that we're all working on these same 7 levers to try to change our destiny as a nation.
As you travel the country and talk to tourism operators or sector associations or destination marketing and management organizations, do you get the sense that the industry is confident and bullish about our sector, or are we still in a period of caution given what's gone on in 2025, particularly south of the border?
I would say in general, the industry is bullish because they can see the growth trajectory for our sector, but it doesn't diminish the challenges they have in the short term, like labor
Yes,
supply. Those things are constraining growth, frankly. And so I can see that the private sector finds that very frustrating. They know that the potential is there, but they have these big challenges to overcome. And I think, destination marketing organizations similarly are seeing strange challenges come their way with their sources of funding being challenged or diminished, with realizing that their organizations must transform to become more than marketing organizations. They really have to be stewardship organizations that are thinking about the development of themselves as a destination. So I've been really pleased to see some of the work that Kamloops is doing, for instance, to go out into the investment world and find investors for things that they know that area needs,
right.
and really proactively thinking about the two sides of the equation that drive demand, the experience and the marketing. And so, you won't find every community everywhere being bullish, and certainly border towns right now are, not having a very bullish feeling, and they've had big challenges this year. But in general, I would say, yeah, there's tons of optimism.
We didn't talk a lot about the United States, which is our largest international market and our best friend. And notwithstanding what's happening at the political level, we still very much value visitors from the United States. Tell me about the Open Home campaign.
I think it's a really inspired piece of marketing. And, one of the things that we know from the sentiment analysis and tracking that we've done for the last couple of years, but thankfully we had it at hand when all of this transpired in early 2025, was Americans still feel good about Canada, but they're a little bit worried that they may not be welcome. And so, we've all heard the stories from hoteliers saying, I keep getting calls from guests saying, will I still be welcome in Canada? Will I be embarrassed, by Canadians because of the reaction of our administration to what's going on trade-wise? And so, they need reassurance. They need to see our warmth and welcoming nature. And, when you see campaigns like the Hug It Out campaign that came out of Quebec,
Yes.
just absolutely went viral in the US, it's because it's tapping into that sentiment and that little bit of trepidation. So Open Home really builds on that by using the Open Table platform and a partnership with Open Table to say, we're opening the homes of Canada to our American friends. So you can book a dinner in an actual Canadian home, and just like you could in a restaurant. And we thought, what better way to tell Americans they're welcome than to have a seat at our table, at our dinner tables. And so it's doing really well, achieving all the things we hoped it would. And we think it's really helping us change the narrative about and answer the question, are you welcome? Of
I
course.
saw the video
Yeah.
and it was terrific, really heartwarming, and people from the U.S. really seem to appreciate the opportunity to be hosted.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's not millions of homes available, but it makes the point.
Yeah. Final question. You're set to step down from
Yeah.
your role in the not too distant future and formally retire. What's the next chapter for you look like?
Yeah, well, it's hard to imagine not working after working for 40 years. And I know you're going through the same thing mentally. And I've always loved work and loved my career. And I've been very, very fortunate along the way. So it's a big change. But I only have so many years left on this planet. And I want to focus on things that are really more sentimental to me, my family, my friends, my new grandchildren. I have 3 little grandsons that are 2, 1, and newborn, and I want to invest in that. And my friends are traveling a lot. I love to travel, and my husband and I would like to go with them more often. And so we'll do that. And we have a little off-grid cabin in Howe Sound that always requires work. So we'll putter away over there too, and I think life will be busy, and I plan to keep taking my French class, and I hope to find other creative outlets for, the great thing about work is it's so mentally stimulating and creative, and that's a part of work that I haven't quite sorted out how I'll replace yet, so I'll keep working on that bit.
I know you'll figure it out, and the days ahead will be wonderful. You've got lots to look forward to, but also lots to be proud of, Marsha. In your time at Destination BC and now Destination Canada, there's a long, rich history of your legacy and footprint on some of the wonderful things that we're experiencing as a province and as a country. I know we could have talked for another hour. There's so much more I want to ask you, but our time is up. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and wish you well in your future endeavors.
Well, thank you for those kind comments, Walt. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and we'll ride off into the sunset together.
I look forward to that. My thanks to Marsha Walden, President and CEO of Destination Canada, for joining me on TIABC's Voice of Tourism podcast.
And thank you for listening. Please share this episode with your professional colleagues and decision makers to help with our advocacy efforts as we seek to build a vibrant, sustainable, and resilient tourism and hospitality industry in British Columbia. Visit our website at tiabc.ca, sign up for our newsletter, become a member of TIABC, or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to find out more about our next Voice of Tourism podcast. If you have a tourism policy issue within BC that needs attention, please send me a note at wjudas@tiabc.ca. This is Walt Judas bidding you farewell until next time.